So this is a panel on healthcare in human-machine collaboration, and we have 4 presenters, and we'll start with Amir. So from ANU.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amir, and in this presentation, I will be talking about performance evaluation for human-machine collaborations in healthcare. This work has been done as part of my research as a PhD candidate at the ANU School of Cybernetics, and is a joint work with my supervisors, Dr. Liz Williams, Dr. Damith, and Dr. Jocelyn. Some of those names may sound familiar to you. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm calling in from, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So what is human-machine collaboration in my research? For the purposes of this presentation, I would like to use this definition for human-machine collaboration adapted from Warren and Herath, which highlights the interactive nature of human-machine collaboration, the partnership that is shaped between the human and the machine, having a shared goal, and that each party brings its own strengths to the table. I'm mostly looking at human-machine collaboration in a work-related context, so this definition works for me, but may not be a good fit for some other contexts, such as arts or in social interactions, for example. The reason I'm focusing on human-machine collaboration in healthcare is that there are some problems in healthcare systems, such as shortage of healthcare workers, that I believe can be addressed using human-machine collaboration. This shortage of healthcare workers may lead to increased workloads and negatively impact the quality of care. And that's why I believe human-machine collaboration can be a potential solution by reducing the workloads and ultimately leading to improvement of the quality of care. Many studies suggest that successful human-machine collaboration can be beneficial in general, and in our case, for healthcare organizations. However, we need to clarify what we mean by using the term successful. How can we measure the level of success in human-machine collaborations? This starts many questions about performance evaluation, metrics, benchmarking, optimization, and so on. The research on performance evaluation for human-machine collaborations uses metrics as the central concept for performance evaluation, which can be in the form of a qualitative metric or a quantitative metric. There are many metrics that have been introduced in this area. However, there is one question that has not been fully answered yet, and that is, how can we choose the right metrics for different types of human-machine collaborations? It is clear that there is no one general solution for all types of human-machine collaborations, and considering the different contexts. But since since my research focuses on healthcare sector, we can have a look at the studies around healthcare systems and see what type of research tells us, what research tells us. To do this, I've used a structure provided by Carlton, which suggests a nested framework for healthcare that allows us to study healthcare in different levels. I believe this quote on the screen by Harvey Feinberg, the president of the US Institute of Medicine, shows the importance of performance evaluation in healthcare. And also highlights the quality of care as an integral part of this process. So to understand how performance evaluation or measurement systems should be designed, we need to understand what we mean by the term quality of care. To answer this question, I refer to a report by Institute of Medicine, which highlights six aspects of quality in healthcare. These aspects include safety, effectiveness, patient-centered care, timeliness, efficiency, and equity. So this means that for performance evaluation system, we need to think about this, to think about finding indicators for these dimensions. I will not go into this, but based on those qualities, there are principles that have been suggested to develop performance measurement systems on a national level. Going back to the nested structure of healthcare, now that we know there are performance measurement or evaluation frameworks for the bigger system, can be a good starting point for us to help us with the design of evaluation systems for human-machine collaborations. Of course, I should note that there are still several layers between these two, such as hospital and clinical level, so their impact on the HMC performance should also be considered in these studies. I will also add that this dimension performance evaluation framework by OIOM and the nested structure of healthcare were just examples. And there are many other frameworks and principles that need to be considered in research in this area. And that concludes my research, my presentation, sorry. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amir. Well, hope that doesn't conclude your presentation. Please hold the questions for Amir to the end of this the talks. We'll have next Ned Cooper from, again, ANU School of Cybernetics.
Thank you, Damith. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, so I think you probably all know me from the last session. So I'm a PhD candidate at the Australian National University. You might not know Snehal Prabhadesai. She's a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan, and she uses methods from human-computer interaction and uncertainty quantification to improve interactions between clinicians and healthcare technologies. And Snehal's experience interacting with a few pathologists for a PhD led to her interest in participatory design, and we met at a conference recently. Unfortunately, Snehal is jumping on a plane right now to a wedding in Bangalore, so unfortunately can't be with us. So I'm going to present on behalf of her, and we're sort of interested in prompting discussion at this workshop on how we might enable pathologists or other clinicians to participate in the design of the automated systems they collaborate with. So decision support systems based on artificial intelligence promise to reduce human errors in decision-making by providing users with relevant and situation-specific predictions. And the systems aim to simplify decision-making and reduce the burden on decision makers, but they also introduce novel failures. So to mitigate these consequences, the human-in-the-loop paradigm encourages human judgment to improve algorithmic performance. So strategies such as algorithm-initiated handoffs enable these support systems to hand over control of a decision-making process to a domain expert in the case of sort of unforeseen or risky situations. But some recent research has shown that handoffs can cause unexpected delays and errors, leading to complex failure cascades. And in addition, in this sort of human-in-the-loop paradigm, humans remain ultimately responsible if such a situation is not sufficiently addressed, as we've seen in sort of some of the Tesla cases. So domain experts experience a loss of control and autonomy over healthcare decisions while remaining responsible for their outcomes. So we also want to note that handoffs may expose socio-technical systems, those within healthcare, to the ironies of automation over the long term. This is one of my favorite papers from the first year of my PhD that Liz shared with me. And the ironies of automation refers to a set of unintended consequences of automation that could detrimentally affect the performance of human operators on critical tasks. And so they were first introduced in this paper on the screen in 1983 by Lorenzini Bainbridge, referring to automated systems in process industries. So even in highly automated modern systems like those in aviation or financial trading or cloud computing, they require human beings for supervision, maintenance, and improvement. But the central irony of the paper, as identified by Bainbridge, is that as automation increases, so does the importance of the contribution of the human operator. So while automation may result in safety and efficiency improvements in healthcare in the short term, drawing on the ironies of automation, we wanted to flag sort of two issues that we think might persist over the long term. The first is that as automatic systems become more dependable, healthcare practitioners shift into a monitoring role. So potentially limiting the retrieval of knowledge from their sort of long-term memory, which requires this kind of frequency of use. And this form of knowledge only develops through that use and feedback. So both the frequency of use and feedback from use are depleted when workers' roles shift from monitoring shift to monitoring rather than doing. And then secondly, increasing the performance of the automatic system makes it harder for human monitoring. So this may mean that practitioners will be increasingly unprepared for handoffs if and when they occur. So in summary, we argue that algorithm-initiated strategies, as they're currently construed, lead to sort of alienation of decision makers rather than giving them autonomy necessarily. In addition, we argue that such strategies may set up healthcare practitioners to fail over the long time, given Bainbridge's ironies of automation. And to date, much of the work in HCI has focused on accustoming clinicians to machines. So for example, some of the work by Carrie Kai and others at Google on uncovering the onboarding needs of clinicians. We encourage a shift in human-centered design in healthcare to reorient control in high-stakes decision-making scenarios. So re-examining social technical workflows and eliciting the strategies of human decision makers when things go wrong to guide systems that balance autonomy and control within healthcare. For example, one sort of thought or idea we had was about learning from existing systems of documentation and transparency in healthcare. So many practitioners, this is coming out of some of the research from St. Hull, take these very meticulously detailed patient notes after all interactions and capture those perspectives and their perspectives and those of their patients. And those notes are handed off to other practitioners or nurses and a constant source of knowledge, particularly when something goes wrong. And in contrast, paradigms for transparent AI, such as like explanations, are often static and they require clinicians to be constantly vigilant, cross-check system predictions to ensure there's no error. So our core today is that the relationship between expert decision makers and decision support systems needs to be reconstructed and redesigned so decision makers are brought in from the periphery to be involved in sort of participatory design processes. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ned. For a workshop on human-machine collaboration, that's a fair bit of pushback for automation since morning. Next up, we have Jocelyn from St. Vincent, from Australia.
Thanks.
Yeah, good to
go. Thank you. You hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks. So I'm a breast surgeon from St. Vincent's in Melbourne, and thank you so much for the chance to talk. I don't really know whether to call it today or tonight because we're in different spots, but I'm very grateful for the chance. So I'm part of what's called the Breaks group, and we're a large collaborative group across the institutions that you can see on the right-hand side there. And I'm really glad that I followed Ned's talk because this follows on really nicely from that collaboration, sort of human interaction theme. So what I'm going to be talking about is what clinicians think about safety and responsibility of using artificial intelligence for mammographic screening. And as I'm sure you're all very aware, there's been an increasing interest in using artificial intelligence for radiology interpretation. And mammography is the perfect scenario for this because we have large data sets of two view imaging, and these huge data sets really lend themselves for the development, testing and validation of a model, and that's what another portion of the Breaks group has been doing. The existing literature around acceptability shows that there's a huge variation of opinion that does seem mostly cultural, depending on where the researchers come from. Different countries seem to have different opinions about this, but there's no doubt that you need to have radiologists on board for a successful implementation of any artificial intelligence involvement in what they do on a day-to-day level. So the aim of this part of our project was to analyse what do clinicians who currently work in breast screen understand and think about artificial intelligence, and what do we need to gain their support in using it in their practice. And we used a mixed methodology, starting with focus groups, which we recruited through the clinical staff of Breast Screen Victoria assessment sites. The discussion guide of the focus group started with what did they think about AI as a general concept, what experience they'd had with it so far at work, and what role did they think that artificial intelligence would have in screening? What did they think clients would think about this approach, and if they had any ethical, legal, or social concerns? And we used a standard qualitative approach with thematic analysis and then discussion about themes. The outputs of the focus groups then went into a survey, which has really only just started, but I'll give you some preliminary results about the survey because it feeds in nicely with the qualitative work. The focus groups were run approximately a year ago with 27 participants, with 5 focus groups and 2 one-on-one interviews, just to allow for people's schedules. You can see the spread of radiologists and mammographers there. The majority of them were that, and a small handful were nurses. Most of them had been working in breast screen for a considerable amount of time, and the majority was mostly working in the breast field. So in terms of the broad themes of the focus group, there were 4 that I'm going to talk about just for the sake of time. So the first was this paradox between resounding optimism of the concept of artificial intelligence, but disappointment with what they've been using to date. The next theme was about the power of synergy between humans and machines, and this is really that human-machine collaboration that we were hearing Amir talk about. There were concerns about accountability and responsibility in this setting, and there were some general reservations and skepticisms that I'll talk about too. So on the first theme, which was the paradox between the clinicians actually being very excited about artificial intelligence, but disappointment with prior experiences, the quote about the excitement is, if we get it right, it'll make our lives as radiologists easier in the screening reading environment, hopefully freeing up more time for us to devote to actual clinical time with clients. This was in contrast to what they reported as their actual experience in using artificial intelligence. There was a lot of frustration in the programs that they'd been using to date. Maybe there's some opportunity there. Maybe it will get better. But at the moment, I still rely on my skills to make the diagnosis with every single case that I deal with. We use another artificial intelligence program, and I think I'd routinely start the day by switching it off, because the number of times it has told me that there's an unfolded aorta or something that's completely irrelevant to any other decision that needs to be made. So moving on to what the clinicians told us about this human-machine collaboration, they all really resounded that it does need to be a group effort between humans and machines. And the quote there is, a radiologist is human. When you have a bad sleep, like we all have those bad days, all those days, we're not on the ball as we'd like to be for whatever reason, like you have a sick kid at home or a parent that you're worried about. So AI is almost there like a safety net. It's like that little bit of extra, a little bit of backup that supports you when you can miss something. So what about accountability and responsibility? There was quite a lot of concern about that, and not surprising considering that radiologists, especially breast radiologists, face a fair amount of litigation. So my concern is, firstly, what is AI? Who will be responsible for the decisions taken by this automated process, whatever that might be, and who will be medically responsible if it's used in the health industry? And in terms of accountability, but everyone has that concern of who's accountable. You know, we're doing the dual reading, it's just the radiologist and the program has the responsibility, or is it the institution that's making you use the AI as an adjunct to clinical practice, or is it the company that wants us to use the AI? Just wanted to quantify some of the concerns about accountability and responsibility. So these are the very preliminary results from the survey. There's only been 19 respondents to date. But when we ask them if they're concerned as to who's at fault if the artificial intelligence makes a mistake, you can see just over 50% of the respondents agree or strongly agree with that statement, that they've got concern about accountability. In terms of accountability, we posed 3 different hypothetical scenarios to the radiologists. So the first one was holding accountability when AI is used as an adjunct, so reads alongside with them. So the current paradigm is 2 independent radiologists read every single mammogram, and if there's a disagreement between those 2 radiologists, it goes to a 3rd arbitrary reader. So in this first scenario, there'd still be 2 main readers. The second scenario there is the AI is replacing one of those human readers. And in the last scenario, which is the first pass reader, all the mammograms are put through the AI algorithm, and the humans only read the ones that they're concerned for. So from the top to the bottom, there's an increasing amount of responsibility held by the AI. And you can see that with that, even though the numbers are small, there's a trend towards the radiologists being less comfortable with that scenario, which is quite logical. There were reservations and skepticisms, particularly around the loss of skills. And we did hear a previous speaker talk about this as well. So the quote here is, one of the challenges is that at the moment, we do have humans with good experience, but if we relinquish more and more of that expertise to an algorithm, then there'll be a crossover point where there'll be no humans with enough experience to veto the AI. So we get to a point when we are the slaves to the AI because no one has the knowledge or expertise to say, hey, the AI is wrong. And there were concerns about safety as well. So in conclusion, there was a mixture of optimism and hope, which was in contrast to their lived experience of working with AI so far, which has been disappointing at best and frustrating at worst. Breast screen health professionals' perspectives range from enthusiastic to hesitant about using AI for mammography, and there were concerns about safety, accountability, responsibility, as well as data safety. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to the participants, MRFF for the funding, the team you can see below there, and I've just popped my email there if anyone wanted to contact. Thanks.
Thank you, Jocelyn. It's good to see the sort of relevant feedback coming from the practitioners as well. We have the final presenters here. Yeah, well, set it up. So I'd like to invite Giorgia Lorenzini from Basel for the final topic of the session. All right, just a minute. There we go.
Okay.
Excellent. How do you do?
You want to move? Okay. Well, this is the mask. Okay, I will. Okay, thank you for the patience for the technical issues. I'm Giorgia, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Basel in Switzerland. And now I'm going to quickly present a paper that I wrote and that is soon going to be published. So if you're interested, like in a month, you can look for the title on Google. And sorry. Okay. So the question of the paper was whether AI is going to impact the doctor-patient relationship, and in particular the decision-making process. And if I wrote the paper is because I think the answer is yes. And so I tried to understand what impact the AI might have on the relationship. And for doing that, first I considered the AI doctor interaction. And then, so I consider in particular the communication, let's say, between the doctor and the AI, and then doctor's professional autonomy. Then I did the same regarding the doctor-patient relationship when the AI is involved. So I consider the doctor-patient communication and then the patient's autonomy. And, oh yeah, that should have been before. Well, it doesn't matter. So when I'm talking about AI, I'm actually talking about something very specific. So it's clinical decision support systems. And I think it's just easier to say AI than CDSS. So that's why I'm using AI. And those are tools that are used by doctors in hospitals, so in clinical settings. And so those are not just generally AI or smartwatches. It's just these kind of tools. And okay, again, my conclusion, since I don't have much time, I will already go to the conclusion, is that I think, so starting from doctors, and doctors need to be competent enough to use the AI. That means that they need to know what the AI can do, what the AI cannot do. So realistically, what they can expect from the AI, how they can use it, and what are AI limitations. So they need to know what the AI cannot do. And at the same time, they need to be able to evaluate and critically assess the AI suggestion, the AI results, in order to include them in their own clinical evaluation. So this might or might not include explainability, which is a big topic in the medical AI. I think it could be included, but I also think we shouldn't focus too much on explainability because it may overshadow other problems. And that's why I'm using competence, because it's wider. It includes more, a bigger knowledge than just explainability. And I think competence is very important. Otherwise, the AI may be sort of paternalistic, which is the opposite of shared decision making. And then therefore the doctors might end up blindly following the AI recommendation without actually deciding how and whether to integrate the AI recommendation in their own clinical evaluation. And this, I think, would establish a double paternalism, because also the doctor wouldn't be able to discuss the AI with the patient, and therefore this would complicate the shared decision-making process. Coming to the patient, I think that there needs to be transparency about the AI. So, of course, the depth in which the AI is discussed with patients might depend on the patient, on the situation, and so on. But I think it's not something that doctors should hide from patients. So it's important that AI is disclosed and discussed. And at the same time, it's very important in order to ensure patients' autonomy that their own values and preferences are assessed and respected. This can be done either by already including them in the AI or simply by ensuring that doctors inquire the patient's preferences and values, even when the AI is used. And so I will finish with this open question that I will leave up to you. It's still open also in my paper. So is the AI going to change this dual relationship of this shared decision-making into a triadic relationship where the AI is also going to be an actor to play a role? Yeah, that's
Don't go anywhere. Just
okay.
Just say that.
All alone.
I'll be here, so don't worry.
Okay.
I'll accompany you. So thank you so much for all the four speakers and your work. And I believe that you got congratulations on your paper as well. And also I believe that Amir and Ned, you got extended talks available online as well.
Amir and Jocelyn.
Amir and Jocelyn, sorry. All right, so we've got about 5-6 minutes for Q&A. Yes.
About 10 minutes. Well,
Okay,
yeah.
we've got 10 minutes.
I'd say like 9 minutes.
All right, we've got 9 minutes precise. So we'll start with the audience here for any of the speakers, please. Yes.
Well, just since you're talking about competence, could you elaborate a bit on what skills are involved in using an AI competently, and maybe the other panelists like Jocelyn and Amir could also reflect on that?
Okay, so I stayed quite general because I think some things need to be still sorted out. So explainability could be one thing, so in the sense that they need to understand the context in which the AI works and what the AI considers. That isn't limited to the causal inferences of AI, of course. And then I think it's important that they know what they are, the AI limitation, because sometimes there is this hype. I think also Jocelyn was talking about the healthcare professionals being disappointed about the AI, what the AI was doing. And that is because usually they talk about AI as something that is going to solve all healthcare problems. And therefore doctors need to be aware of what the AI can solve and what the AI cannot solve. Otherwise they're going to be disappointed. So I think it's a general training about what AI is, how it works, and what it can do and cannot do.
Jocelyn, do you want to add something to that?
I just think it's really, explainability is important, but I also think radiologists or any other healthcare professional that you decide to use artificial intelligence with really need to be on board. You know, when you're working in a hospital, you're sort of bombarded in a way with like different electronic systems that are supposed to be helpful, and it's very easy to get a bit cynical about that. And so you need to be involved from the ground up to make sure that it's something that is actually helpful. And in terms of explainability, it was interesting when we talked to the clinicians about explainability, because there was quite a variety of responses about how much they wanted to know. Some wanted to know lots and lots, and others just wanted to know that it worked and that then they'd have some faith in it. But they really need to trust that it works and that it's in the patients and their best interests.
Thanks. I think this was also directed to Amir.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer the question. I believe like there are some ways that we can include some of these factors into the metrics that we use, we include in our metrics or in our performance evaluation approach. But again, it's really context dependent. It should be considered based on the context that we are looking at, based on the application that we are considering in our research. So I know that's not a very perfect answer, but yeah, I hope that helps.
Thanks. Ned, do you want to add something to that? Or?
Yeah, I just had one thing. I just thought it was really interesting in Jocelyn's talk, how the response has changed based on when and how involved an artificial intelligence system was in the decision-making process. I think one of the really fascinating things about that paper, the Hello AI onboarding paper, was that they did some sort of qualitative research and asked pathologists what they wanted to know when they first interacted with an AI system. And it was less the sort of case-specific reasoning behind an individual model decision, but it was more like the global properties of the model, things like its broad strengths and limitations, the design objectives and things like that. And so the qualitative findings of that were that they were sort of using it, trying to get an understanding of what it was like compared to like seeking a second opinion in a natural sort of workflow in a workplace. And I think that was it was interesting to compare that to Jocelyn's talk, where she was raising this idea about the different involvement of humans in the pathway and how comfortable people were when AI was inserted in different locations and that.
Thanks. Do you have online?
Yes, we do. I'd like to ask a question on behalf of Maria Camilla. Considering when automation backfires is a great point to add into the mix. Maria Camilla has seen the same problem in surgical robotics. Fewer and fewer surgeons who perform robotic surgery are skilled in laparoscopic surgery, and even fewer are confident with open surgery, which is the final failover when conversion is needed. And already there are mid-career robotic surgeons who have seen at most 1 to 2 open surgery instances for the procedures they perform in a robot-assisted way. So deployment of the technology undermines the effectiveness of the recovery mechanism in the long term. We need to think of alternative mechanisms to check the performance of the AI or accept the error. In some cases, especially when an amount of data is very large, do we use another AI to evaluate the performance of the first AI?
I think that one's for me. Yeah, I think, yeah, I believe adding more AI wouldn't solve the solution. I think that's like the impact on the competency of surgeons, for example, when they use robotic surgery systems, is not something that we can solve by adding more AI. I think that's something that should be included in the training processes, in the workflows that is that is shaped in the healthcare system. And I don't think the additional layer of AI for evaluating the performance would give us a sustainable solution for this, because again, how can we make sure that the second layer of the second AI layer is doing a good job? So again, that could lead us to a snowballing of AI layers, I guess. So yeah, I think choosing the right performance metrics may help us in dealing with even high amounts of data. But again, that's a challenge by itself.
Thanks, Amir. Any of the other panelists online, would you like to add something? No.
Can I comment as a surgeon?
Sure. Yes, please.
I just think that that's evolution of skill, actually. I don't think that that's so much de-skilling in that example there, but it's not about evaluation of AI, sorry.
Thanks. We have another question.
Yeah, so
maybe you want to
come here, or should I come
probably come over? Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got a question for Jocelyn, and I'm very interested in this topic of AI-based radiology, because I think it's one of the first applications of AI that we see where it really delivers value in organizations. And I'm wondering if you already can see can say something about in practice how disruptive that technology is in the workforce. So is it just a matter of the existing staff and giving them a course on how to interact with that technology, or do you really need totally different roles in the organization, or is it that some people just never get used to these new technologies and that you need a new generation? So what are your experience that you can already report?
So my experience in this is purely what we got from the focus groups as feedback, and my interpretation of what I was hearing was that the systems that are currently in practice in Australia are too immature to be actually beneficial to their workflow. And I think it's a pure immaturity issue, and that I would hope with time that they would improve. It was interesting, in total, the radiologists probably talked about 6 different systems that they had in place. The quote that I mentioned was a chest x-ray interpretation, and you think that chest x-ray interpretation should be readily, similar to mammography. It's a single film, relatively easy to interpret, but yet it's just not that helpful. The other programs were about looking at brains to assess for brain hemorrhages, or looking for clots in the lungs or polyps in bowel for CT colonography. And it's interesting to reflect, what could help to make the existing, because clearly people have developed the existing AI models in this situation have put in huge amounts of work to try and make this as good as it can be, and yet it's still not helpful in the actual clinical setting. And I think it's just an immaturity issue. I would just expect it to improve with time.
That's interesting, yeah, because it has been for quite a while. Do you think it's purely a technological challenge that the neural networks for the recognition should be better, or is it more also on the context interaction? Maybe?
Well, I think that the job of a radiologist is hard to put down to a neural network, because there's so much more that they put into it. Like, the clinical context is really important for their decision making as well, and that's what's difficult, I think, to teach a system.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that sort of machine learning model, where the algorithms constantly learning with input from the radiologist would bridge that gap for us.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for your answer.
Thanks, Adrian.
Can I quickly add something
Yes,
on that? Very quick, because I also had some interviews that were not focus group, but one-on-one interviews with experts on AI, and that include also doctors. And we actually tried to understand like what were the issues of implementing AI, and some said that it's still like not good enough. But some actually mentioned this problem of not being familiar with technology, or being maybe an older generation of doctors and waiting for more doctors, more younger doctors that are more comfortable with technology in general to get into the practice. And I actually had one participant saying that we need to wait for the current generation of doctors to die. So that's an issue that they felt.
I thought that punchline was coming at some point. All right, so can you thank the panel again for their wonderful talks?